Welcome to the Marketing and Operations Summit for FRLA. I am one of the hosts for today's session, Charles Musgrove, joined by Chad Mackay. Now, Chad is the operator. He's the guy with the in-depth knowledge of what we're going to talk about. I'm the CPA, I'm the accountant, so I know the number side of this, how this works. Chad has lived it, he's done it. So thank you for attending this session. I think this is going to be a very impactful session that we talk about. And before we get started, I just want to say how great it is to be in the state of Florida, to be a native Floridian, and to be, I think, part of the greatest state in the United States with the greatest governor in the U.S. So let's give a round of applause for that. All right, so let's get started. Chad, why don't you get it started right here?
Yeah, I know the title and the presentation was Thrive with $17 minimum wage. So you're only facing 15 coming up, but I'm actually facing 17 January 1st in Seattle. So I figured the 17 might get your attention rather than just 15, which sounds so pedestrian nowadays. But I think the reason I'm here is because I was interviewed a few years ago on MSNBC, and I said, you know, I don't care about minimum wage. We left that behind as an issue. I think at that point it was 2 years prior to that. So I've operated in Washington, Oregon, Seattle, Portland, and I haven't cared about minimum wage for almost 6 years. And we're going to tell you why.
I'm Charles Busgrove. Like I said, I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant. I've worked with many business owners just like you in this room today, working as a CPA, as an advisor for the restaurants. I've also owned businesses. I've owned a staffing company, a technology and IT company, and believe it or not, I've also owned a restaurant. So I've been in your shoes before, and I got to tell you, it's the hardest job there is that I'm aware of. So hats off to you for doing that. I'm a board member of the Northwest Florida chapter of FRLA. I think that's the best chapter in all the state of Florida. So we've got the chairman, Jim Shirley, is on our board. So. And I worked with the FRLA on a task force where we looked at the $15 per hour minimum wage and the impact and how you can manage that change. So that kind of led me to how I met Chad. I host a podcast called the Answers That Count podcast, and we've got a series, I put up here a series that we did relating to the $15 per hour. So if you want the podcast, if you're on YouTube, go to the channel, check it out, subscribe to that, and look at these podcasts. The one that you see, Chad, the second one from the left there is we talk about the tipping model, the commission model. So check that out. That's a great video that Chad did.
All right. So what I want to talk about today, or we're going to cover, is Thrive Beyond 15. And each of those words actually is chosen for meaning. We're going to start with the first because if you haven't paid attention to what's going on, you passed minimum wage here, $15 an hour. Amendment 2 kicks in here September 1st for your first September 30th piece, September 30th. And just so you know, Washington State, when we passed the minimum wage initiative, is $13.50. So congratulations for passing a $15 an hour here. I'm just kidding. The point is, doesn't matter whether it's red or blue, Democrat, Republican, male, female, rural, urban, people believe in this idea. They don't understand our business and they don't care to. So you have to live with the consequences. What has just happened to you is what has happened to us, and that is there's a war declared on hours. When you start going after tipped hours, you're going to start caring about every 15 minutes because it doesn't seem like much, but when you count all the bodies and all the things and you got $3.50 every 15 minutes people are milking that clock, it starts making you change your mind. Mine's over $4.25, $4.50, $5 an hour every 15 minutes if you count payroll taxes, etc. And this is 2 times your current tipped wage that you have to pay attention to. So I do want to stress that it's a war on hours. You've never managed hours for your front of the house like you're gonna moving forward. Give this over to Charles. Going to talk about the impact of what 15 actually means.
Many of you have seen this scale before. This shows the changes in the minimum wage through 2026. So you know we're facing the largest dollar change and percentage change come September 30th of this year. We've already had one increase so far. That change through 2026 represents a 116% cumulative increase in the tip minimum wage. It's 85% in the regular minimum wage since it started. So that's a huge change. And compare that to what Washington did when they started at $13.50. We're starting at $15. So you know what's going to happen. There's no backing up. I mean, it's already baked in. We're going to have this increase. Do you know what the cost is going to be to your business? If you don't know it, you really need to do this calculation. We've taken I think kind of an average restaurant. We've looked at weekly number of tipped employees of 45. The average hours worked for each one of those, 29 hours, 1,300 total tipped hours for a week. If you compare that to if you look at what restaurant size that is, that's about an annual revenue of $3.5 million. And this is not including wage compression. You're looking at almost a $1.8 million impact just on the change, cumulative change in tip minimum wage for that time period.
So I want to point this out because when I did the first calculations, I was just looking at like when we got there, how big would it be? It was $700,000 for the two businesses we had just in Seattle. We ran this number, and he's going to show you the chart. I never ran that. The cumulative impact over 5 years of increased costs. Right. It's actually pretty staggering.
The $700,000 he's looking at, that's 1 year, one restaurant group. So if you think of it, how this wage is going to go up, and that's just a multiple every year of that increase. You're not going to have fewer hours. So it's easy to get to $1.8 million. Now I know if you're in the back, it's hard to see this chart, but this charts it out. We did factor in payroll taxes and a nominal workers' comp increase as well. So you can see how that increase just is dramatic. It's a calculation that you need to do to understand what that impact is going to do. Once you see that dollar impact, then it's going to drive your decisions on how you manage that change. So the question is, are you going to be proactive or are you going to be reactive to the change?
Yep. So we got one clicker, so we're going to be handing back and forth. Yeah, so I mean, everybody's, we're always talking about being proactive, but life gets busy, coronavirus, all sorts of stuff happens. And so what we found in Seattle and in Washington and Oregon, where there's been lots of labor laws, is most people do this. Right? They bury their head in the sand. They're like, you know what? I'll push some increases through. I'll deal with it next year. Right? I'll get to it later. But expediency gets in the way of the things that are really important. And so most people are going to do this, even in this room. Hopefully, most of you won't after this talk. But most of the operators out there are not going to make substantial changes. And it won't be too late. It'll just be a lot harder. So here's some options. These are all the normal things, right? Like price increase, right? So that's what I'd be doing right away. Like just make that up real quick because the stuff we're going to talk about later takes a bit of time. Redo your menus, hours of operation. In Seattle, coming back after COVID, after shutdowns, after downtown getting shut down, a lot of the restaurants, including ours, we've gone to dinner only, Tuesday through Saturday. We actually just cut out lunch. Because of $17 an hour with no tip credit for minimum wage, you tell me how lunch makes sense in a full-service restaurant. Okay, so these are all things you can think about. New technology, got the robot out there delivering things. Maybe that's going to solve your problems. The customer-focused technology, let them order at the table. Revise your concept. But these are all tweaks. What I want to teach you is that you can actually thrive beyond 15. You can thrive with a $15 minimum wage because I'm thriving with a $17 or about to be $17 minimum wage. So this is Restaurant Hospitality. Had a great article. When an old model doesn't work, change it. Right? So this was 6 ways that you could survive big changes for restaurants' labor problems. So there was doing administrative fees. So you see this with surcharges. San Francisco's got healthcare charges, living wage, a lot of different ways. You can look at working with your GMs and chef on open book management, profit sharing, rethink your model. You do revenue sharing, tip pooling. There's lots of ways to try to carve this up. The service charge sales commission, which is what I'm going to cover in depth today. And then there's the hospitality included model, which was made famous by Danny Meyer. I'm going to make a comment on this because I think it's important, because what Danny Meyer did was a disservice to the full service restaurant industry, because what he did is he declared a war on his servers because he wanted equality of outcome for the servers in back of the house, and he thought he could balance the equation by taking money out of the servers' pockets and putting it into the cooks. And so what I'm going to show you is there's ways to make servers make as much money as they've been making before, maybe even a little bit more, and the ability to make sure you're paying your back of the house well. We have never tip pooled in our restaurants, meaning tip pooled in the back of the house. We have busters and all those things. I'm always treated the back of the house fairly. That's another profession. We treat them exceptionally well. But that's what happened is they rolled everything up together, declared war on their servers, had massive turnover and fleeing. And what I want to show you, there's another way. The no tipping era is officially dead. You read this all the time. Again, I want to come back to Danny Meyer, and we're going to talk about and just link one fair wage, because it's going to come up again and again, because this is the movement that's trying to destroy the full service restaurant industry and take away tipping as a model. And by the way, they're doing a pretty good job of gaining public support, studies, and getting cities to pass laws and states to pass laws to go after the tip credit. I'll skip this. So focus of this session is going to be the service charge model, which is guest facing, and then the commission and compensation model for servers and bartenders. So we're going to end up making these slides available for you. What I wanted to make clear to our team when we started down this pathway was that I was not declaring a war on my sales team. I love my servers. I want them to make exceptional money. I want them to be the best paid in the industry, because I want to make sure I have all the servers to take care of all the great guests that we have. So whatever we were going to do with them and not to them. And we want to keep them whole while trying to balance out everything else. So this whole bottom is this wage disparity. To me, we've got different professions that are all working in one location. I think it was, not you, somebody yesterday, I think Dan Murphy pointed out, it's very rare that the salespeople are working hand in hand with the actual assemblers and manufacturers. And that's one of the things we have in the restaurant industry is that, you know, the car salesperson isn't working with the auto assembler, but in restaurants they're working together. So we have to deal with culturally what that looks like, but those are two different professions. My chefs make more than my servers. My GMs make more than the servers. Servers are one aspect, and if you want to go that route, then you need to go down and up if you want to change professions. So this is where we started. This was 6 years ago. Our minimum wage was $9.47 an hour, and we have not had tip credit since 1981 in Washington State. So that was just regular wage. That was 6 years ago. Because of our model, we're a high service tableside restaurant. We have a lot of tip outs and tip pooling to support staff. Servers kept about 12.5% of their net sales. In addition, about 30% of our business was already contracted parties, mandatory gratuity, parties of 6 or more. So we had a basis and some background in charging service charge. And I'm going to jump right into what we did. Yeah.
How big is this restaurant footprint since you're 76s?
What's
How many seats are in this restaurant?
So in total, like Aqua, there's 15,000 square feet. We do about 9 million dinner only. So we do have private dining rooms, which is a big component, but it's good size. And again, it was the fact that we actually had service charge. We have done that, and we'll talk about what that might mean. I'm just going to use our example because this is what we ended up doing. And this is base wage, $1 an hour. People are like, why'd you choose $1? We're like, well, because the attorney said we could do whatever we wanted, but at least if it was $1, people would clock in. So we chose $1 an hour. And then our commission is 15% of gross sales less comps. In addition, we do allow an opportunity for a bump. And for those that haven't worked the floor in a long time, that's just an extra tip because you did a really great job. So those three things together is our service charge and our commission model combined. So the nice thing is, so if I do $10,000 in sales, how much do my servers cost me? Anybody? 15%. That's it, right? I've actually created an entirely variable cost model. You're not going to see this all the way in the back, but I want to show you. This is real time from last period compared to year to date in this is our Portland El Gaucho location. So our total labor for front of the house, this does not include the GM or a private dining salesperson, but this includes floor managers, bartenders, expos, food runners, bussers. Our total labor for front of the house was about $25,000. That was $375,000 in revenue. And for the year to date, and we were shut down for 3 months, so you can keep that in mind. Our total labor front of the house was $121,000 on $2 million in sales. Now that doesn't include the $400,000 that was for the sales that was the service charge income. So what we're showing you here is the true cost of what it takes to run your business, how much do your servers actually make? There's probably nobody here that has a P&L that actually has how much do your servers actually cost you. This is a way to, when you go to this model, you can see where is your money going and how can you be intentional about it. If you have a business where there's a lot of cash or people weren't declaring or you weren't enforcing declaration, you're going to have 100% declaration, 99% of what compensation is coming through your restaurant. So there is some cost to it. And then finally, you're going to lose out on this Fica Tip Credit, which if you're an owner, you know something about because it's a gigantic benefit. If you're just running restaurants and GM, it's never on the P&L statement, it's in your tax statement. Yes, sir?
On that 15% revenue commission, how do you reconcile sales tax on that? If you're doing, what do you have, about $250,000 for the quarter? So if you've got $1 million in server commission on 7% sales tax here in Florida.
That's on service. It would be on service charge that the sales tax would go on. The commission is a payroll, not a sell to the public. Service charge is property of the restaurant. Commissions are property of the employees. Never shall those two mix.
Okay, so I understand.
Yep, it's just another piece. Sales tax is in and out. It never shows up on the P&L.
No, but I guess what I was asking was if you increase your prices to correlate that 15% commission, how did you guys?
We put a 20% service charge on every check.
Gotcha.
That's, yep, and then the house retains that. And I don't know if Florida charges sales tax on service charge. I'm going to let Charles take over on the FICA Tip Credit.
The FICA Tip Credit, as Chad said, it's not a number that shows up on your P&L. It's not on your balance sheet. It's not in the financial statements for the business. However, this is a credit that's a benefit to the business, either the business or if it's a flow-through business like an S Corp, an LLC, it goes to the owner of that business. So it's a rather large, it's a big deal. The credit is not a deduction, it's a credit, so it offsets the tax liability that's owed on the profits of that business. So you have to look at that differently. You can't equate $1 of tax credit to a top dollar of revenue. Here's an example, $1,000 FICA tip credit. So if you relate that to revenue that goes through the business, because you have to, the FICA tip credit is after-tax dollars. It's an after-tax benefit. So if you equate that to revenue, assuming a 10% profit margin and a 35% effective tax rate, which I think is pretty reasonable. It equates to a $15,000 revenue number. So a $1,000 tip credit equals $15,000 plus of revenue. That's a big deal. So when you're doing your calculations, when you're doing your modeling, you have to pay attention to the loss of that FICA tip credit if you go to the commission service charge model. Because under the service charge model, remember, that's our revenue. We're not doing the tip credit. We don't get the advantage of the FICA tip credit. So here's a quick example, a question. One employee works 20 hours a week, one tipped employee. Average for that employee, $30 per hour, including their wage. What's the annual FICA tip credit for that one employee? More than $1,000? $1,698 FICA tip credit for one employee working 20 hours a week. So if you carry that out, assuming again 10% profit margin, 35% tax rate, that one employee, I've rounded these numbers, 1,600. 50 employees equals 84,000 FICA tip credit. What's the revenue equivalent of that under those assumptions? $1.5 million. So again, it's not that you don't decide not to go to a commission model, service charge model, but you have to understand the financial implications of that. The last thing you want to do is convert models unaware of that FICA tip credit, and then your owner gets the tax bill on September or October 15th related to the prior year, and he's going to say, where's my FICA tip credit? Why am I paying $100,000 more in tax? So it's a big deal. You need to plan for that before it hits you at the end.
Right. Yeah, and I think for our group, we figured it was 2% of revenue. So it was 10% of the service charge that we lost as a FICA tip credit. So it was a big number, so we need to put that into our model. We're going to leave lots of room for Q&A because we know there's going to be a ton. Want to talk about beyond, because 15 is just the start. And there's some other things that are going to happen here in Florida because 15 is, you're on the march to 15. Does anybody know who this is? Boo! What's his name? What's that?
John Morgan.
John Morgan?
John Morgan.
John Morgan for the people.
Yeah.
Right?
The People's Army.
Yeah. Yeah, he out of the goodness of his heart did he fund a movement, right?
Friends with Charlie Crist.
That's right, I'm friends with a lot of people. So unfortunately for you, Florida's got worse civil litigation laws than Washington State does. We actually, even though it's bad up in Washington State, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, you got a little tougher down here. And this guy's on a warpath for you. You just don't know yet because he's going to wait till 3 years ticks in, 5 years, and they're going to pounce on you. Couple pieces to think about for beyond 15. Other things that are coming up and why you want to consider, and we'll come back to a couple other items. There's a ton of headlines out there. I think you're going to see, we saw the first study out of Notre Dame that was done around sexual harassment and tipping in the service industry. NPR covered it, New York Times, One Fair Wage. That just came out. It was the first in-depth, actually peer-reviewed, real study versus SEIU or ROC doing an employee survey. So if you don't think sexual harassment and what's next, discrimination, are on the docket for civil litigation, then you've been putting your head in the sand, because that's coming too. This One Fair Wage, remember I talked about Danny Meyer? He's now partnered with One Fair Wage to say, hey, we got to operate better as restaurants and we should pay these high minimum wages and high wages. They are funding tons of studies as well, and they use those in the media and the press to help drive this perception that restaurants are a bloodbath of sexual harassment and racial discrimination. This is the last one that just came out. This is the one about tipped workers. This is the Notre Dame study that tip workers were subject to more sexual harassment, especially coming out of COVID. So again, these are going to be repeating themes, and as you start seeing and reading the paper and listening to the news, you're going to hear this over and over and over. And by the way, 15, you heard over and over and over and over, and it's now here. Tipping perpetuates racism, classism, poverty, right? You've heard all of these things. Racist history of tipping, okay? Did anybody see this headline from about 2 weeks ago? One Fair Wage announces $1 million relief fund for wary restaurant workers to stay in the industry. This was a plea. If you're going to quit the restaurant industry, please don't. We'll actually write you a check. You just write in for a grant. We will pay you. And I can't remember if it was $1,000 for the first thing. But all you have to do is write in, tell your situation of why your job's so bad, and they'll pay you to stay in it. And then you do the next step, which is you basically agree to publish out on social media a story, and they'll pay you for that. And then the final is pull together a group of other employees, and we'll pay you for that. Okay? This is incredibly inventive, right? Don't quit. Tell us how bad it is and send your story in, and we'll propagate and send it out. So, again, they're setting you up for bigger and bigger settlements. And I think one of the things for, at this point around tip credit wages and other is that the incremental meal rest periods and paid rest breaks are small right now, even though they're big if you get into class action. But you start getting to 15, and then by the way, 15 is just the beginning, because we're beyond 15 because you actually start down a CPI increase, which of course they pick the most generous CPI indicators. So it'll be 15, it'll be 15.50, it'll be 16, 16 a quarter. That your class action, your wage theft, all of those things start to exponentially go up. So just like the cumulative wage impact of moving to 15 that Charles demonstrated was $1.8 million for a $3 or $4 million company. Well, that's $1.8 million in additional wage theft opportunities that the class action attorneys are going to come after. In Washington State, we lost wage protection years ago, right? So we have no EPL coverage for wage protection, but we did have it for defense. Well, 2 years ago, they took it out of the entire state. You cannot get EPL coverage for even defense costs anymore for wage violations. I mean, just think about that. You don't even get the panel rates for the attorneys out there. You can't even take a $100,000 deduction on those defense costs. So these costs start to accumulate, and these class action attorneys play a very long game, just like One Fair Wage and these others. And they are laying up for devastating impact over the next 3 to 5 years if you just stick to your current path. So one of the things you have to think about is how do you inoculate yourself? How do you get more defensive and deal with that overall? So
yeah, that's a big deal to lose that EPLI coverage, because any of you that has used your EPLI coverage in the past, you know what a great benefit that is. So if you've done that and if you paid attorney cost in the past, you know what attorney cost, how it can nearly bankrupt you. So you take that out of the equation when you have this coming on top of you with the sexual harassment, the racial discrimination. It's a very daunting wave that's coming on the restaurants in the state of Florida.
Yeah. So I'll let you.
Yes, prepare financial models. So this is what are the action plans that you should do now? We've thrown a lot at you. These are some big concepts, some big ideas, some big changes from the models that you have. So you really need to do financial models on what it looks like, staying with the tipping model that you have now and going to a commission model. So you have to factor in those costs, make sure you account for the FICA Tip Credit, the loss of that FICA Tip Credit. Have backup plans. When we started the presentation, we went through other ideas to consider, the things that Chad said were kind of automatics, the technology, the menu changes. Maybe you change your model that you have. So you've got to consider all of those. Consult with an expert. Some of these things are complicated. Make sure that you've got the right experts on your team, your financial experts, your HR, your employment law experts, and the industry experts, people like Chad that have gone through this in the past. It's important to lean on those people that have already done this, that have experienced it in the past.
And then that transition to a service charge commission model, really think about it as a phased-in implementation. It took us, we were at least 3 to 4 months in roundtables with our key server teams, key people that we knew we needed to talk with, to present, to bring up the ideas, to get them on board that we were all facing some issues in terms of, luckily our servers saw that it was a giant issue in Seattle. But you got to bring the core people that are going to be the influencers up to speed. And then test a unit or two, right? Like you got to test this thing and make sure it works before you rip it out and do it for every location. We did 2 restaurants in Seattle to begin with. Verified, made some adjustments, mostly around reporting and commission statements for the servers before we rolled it out across the company. And we did that in November, and we lost, and that was November 5 years ago. We lost not one server over the change, which is a big deal, especially in this kind of market. Make sure you include the unit leaders in the process. So again, you got to find those people that are influencers, and it's not necessarily the people that have been around the longest, it's the ones that people trust. And you got to get them on board. And we say, do it with them, not to them. If you just go out and rip this and go, we're doing this, you're going to get backlash because people don't like to be told what to do they? No. Just like you don't like to be told what to do, they don't like to be told either. So bring them along with you, help educate, help understand. We produced, not only we showed them what they made under their old model, we showed them what we thought they'd make under their new model. We showed commission statements to every single server we sat down with across the company and said, if this isn't right, we'll make adjustments. Turned out it worked out better than
Chad,
we thought.
one thing of point there is you can be off somewhat on the numbers and still make this a success. You can have the numbers absolutely right and miss on this part of it, and it can be a total disaster. So you've got to have that culture preservation done correctly. You've got to have that communication done correctly. So Chad was a trailblazer in this, and he was a success at that. So he's doing something right in that communication part of it and to bring people on board.
We had another prominent restaurateur in Seattle who did the service charge model, and then they did kind of a revenue sharing model. But he did it to him. And I love this guy, he's fantastic. But again, it was a war on servers. He was like, well, let's balance all of the world's problems in one unified equation, and somehow we're going to solve everything in one fell swoop. And he ended up losing about half of his service staff. So I don't know about you, I can't afford that, not only from a financial turnover perspective, but longevity of guests, right? Making sure that our guests still see familiar faces. And at the end of the day, we figured the most, because the question comes, well, how did the customers take it? How did the guests take it? Said we wanted to make sure that there was one question answered the way that we wanted it answered. And that was when our regular guest asked our regular server, how's this working for you? That they would say, this has been great. Okay? That was not what you heard coming out of New York. That was not what you heard coming out of some of these other places, because they were taking money away versus doing it with the service and trying to figure that out. So we're just going to Q&A now, if that's good. So do you want to?
Yeah, we're good with this. And if you would like a copy of the presentation, here's Chad's email, my email, our contact information. Shoot us an email, ask us for it. If you've got questions for either one of us or both of us, then do that. We'll be happy to help you with that as best we can. So with that, we've got a few minutes left. How are we doing on time?
No, we're good.
We've got 3 minutes according to the official schedule, but we've got to be over to see the governor at 12 o'clock. So let's take some questions. Yes, ma'am.
Yep. You said that you were using a flat 15% model on your commission.
Yep.
In the traditional retail environment, commissions vary based on product. Did you explore that at all, like for
We didn't. And part of the reason is our liquor liability insurance didn't want us to this is years ago, didn't want us to pay more for liquor and wine sales than food sales. So just for simplicity, we just kept it, whatever you sell, food and beverage, you're getting 15%. Yes, sir. Per person average is about 100, between 100 and 110. This comes up because people are like, oh, well, you guys are high end and we're low end. I've not met a restaurant that's full service that has an average tip of less than 20%. Right? So whatever your model is, you're still, whatever the check average you're at, you just got higher table turns. Right? So again, for the check average doesn't matter as much as what's your total ring and can you keep servers intact. Yes, sir.
It's really hard to hear back here.
Oh, okay.
I want to let you know that you guys all will be around.
Oh, we'll stay here until 11:55.
You guys can stay right around.
Yeah, that's true.
I will tell you that dinner will be served at 11:30, 12 o'clock. We got to come out.
Oh, 11:30 is their lunch.
11:30 is going to open up.
But that's the buffet, so you,
Try to keep the reading really quiet. Also, if you need this information, you can get over Chad. I told the FRLA.
and Charles and I are both here the next 2 days as well. So. Cool. Cool. Yes, sir.
From an employee perspective, what was the average change in pay? And was it always positive or did it vary?
So two things to think about. One is on the server side, they actually, when we originally did it, we assumed there would be 0 bumps. Well, it turned out that it's between 2 to 6%. So it's a pretty big, so the average server increased about 15%. Post-COVID, they've been killing it. Like they're averaging like 100, 110 bucks an hour right now. Okay, where it did hurt and where we froze wages is we converted all of our bussers, all those people over from what they were making with tips to a flat hourly rate. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to admit, but I was paying some of my bussers when I converted them $35 an hour because they were making $55,000 a year before, we're averaging, 32 hours a week. And so what I just told them is that my job is I'm not going to take it from you. So the first year we lost money, and then ever since we've gained it all back. I pay the kitchen.
Okay.
I've always paid the kitchen.
Okay. Did that make the kitchen want to maybe transition to a front?
No, because there was no way. I told the bussers, you're never getting a raise, and nobody ever is coming in higher. And by the way, over time, your hours are going to go down. If you want to make more money, let's get you into serving. Let's get you transferred over. I want you to get into a career instead of locking you into a position that's hard to leave because I overpaid you. I mean, shame on us and by the way, y'all have got that too. You're paying bussers and stuff more than your kitchen. You're whining about paying your kitchen. Like, really? If this is an industry, this is how we do it? So, yes, sir. And then.
How did all these changes affect your rates in the kitchen, your pay rates in the kitchen, and what did you guys do?
So pay rates in the kitchen were going up. Pre-COVID, they had gone up 40% in 2.5 years, and it was market driven. My kitchen never made minimum wage, and so it wasn't a competition between those sides. But now we can advertise for a busser, and maybe they start at 20 bucks, 21 bucks, but they only work 4-hour shifts. Right? And the front desk runners and food runners. But if they're good, then we'll start working with some of those other positions. Yes, sir. And then, sir.
You use the term server. How do you do bartenders in that?
So bartenders they typically get a little bit higher base wage. They get a percentage of their sales. And again, it's however your system's set up. And then they get an override on all liquor sales across the restaurant. So they get a commission rate across.
So you have kind of a server and a bartender separate.
Yeah, so you probably have something where the bartenders are getting tipped by the servers now. So you have to look at your model and replicate whatever is going to work so that it's not a major change.
And is this a employment?
And by the way, the bartenders ring up a lot more drinks under this model than the old giveaway model where they really supplemented their income with your money.
And is your pool of servers and bartenders then, has that increased? I mean, is that just this helped you from a retention and hiring?
I've got the best compensation program in the city. Every time the minimum wage has gone up, and now with tip pooling being legal again for the kitchen, my competition is all trying to balance their back of the house wages by taking tips from the servers, and I win. I don't have a server labor problem. Sir.
With your higher wage for your hourly employees, how did it affect your salary that you have to pay for your family? How fast did you have to adjust up on their salaries?
So, I think there's two. Support staff works more limited hours. So it wasn't like they're gonna, you're gonna get $25 an hour as a busser and work 40 hours a week. So that wasn't the impact. What we have seen is just a general impact in, especially post-COVID, where we probably, at least in our area, we've probably lost 30% of full-service restaurant workers left the industry. Amazon hired 500,000 people from full-service restaurants last year. So you're seeing wage increases on that management level. Now what we do different than a lot of people is all of our floor managers get commissions too. So they're on a base salary plus commissions, because I want everybody rowing the boat together, right? And commissions is a way to do that. And then my GMs and chefs get a percentage of EBITDA operating income. So get just additional incentive. So everybody's driving sales, and then they're making sure they turn into profits.
So what's their commissions then between the different? They're all at 50%.
The floor managers?
Yeah.
No, they're on different commissions. Yeah. But I'm just trying to incent them. But about a third of their income comes from sales.
What do you give them in commissions, and how do you base that for the floor manager?
So if we're trying to get them to $70,000, $80,000 a year, we might have we have to have a $55,000 base now, because our overtime exemption for salaried employees in Washington State is based on the minimum wage, so that just ratcheted up. So, and then we put a percentage. Yep.
Also, Sarah has actually implemented it in his restaurant.
We're trying to follow it already. We started meeting with our employees. Our meetings.
All right, thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I'll be around.